I do think that in a lot of instances, you know, a sizable amount of blame and ownership can be placed on the parents.
Okay.
And that also they should be compelled and interested in helping in intactivism. And we don't see that at the moment from even a lot of the parents that would quote unquote call themselves regret parents.
Hello, Intactivists. Today I have a special guest with me, Carter Steinhoff. How are you today?
Doing good. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. It's great to have you here. So, for those who don't know you, who are you?
Yeah, like you said, my name is Carter Steinhoff. My background is in software engineering, and I've also starting to dabble a lot more in user interface design and UX. And I've been in the intactivist space for about 6.5, 7 years now.
Okay, that's quite a long time to do Intactivism for. So, what have you been doing for those past 6.5, 7 years?
Yeah, not too much, but I have started a few Discord servers. A lot of intactivists will find me online doing your typical social media activism. I'm in a lot of the Facebook groups, a lot of the Twitter groups, and just doing a lot of online activism.
Okay, so what are the core focuses of these social media groups that you start, and how do you join them? So our listeners can also join them if they want.
Yeah, yeah. In terms of social media groups that I've started, it's exclusively on Discord. And to be transparent, I've started these communities simply to share and express my own personal feelings on this topic. So it's really a server where that I can invite people into that are in my network that I want to kind of stay in contact with and distribute information to. So it's not the goal. There's no strong goal with them. There's no coherent goal with them. It's just for me to dump my stream of consciousness to people that I want that are in my network that are interested in this information and kind of interested in my perspective.
Okay, so when you say like you've been in activism for 6.5 years, how would you define being in intactivism? Like, is that when you first started your like Discord group 6.5 years ago, or like what do you mean?
I guess, yeah, that's a good question. I've been exposed to this topic for 6.5 years. In terms of activism, probably more around five years that I've been doing activism. And yeah, around 5 years ago is when I started my first Discord group, my first Discord server, and started inviting a lot of intactivists into that server. It was called Forefronts. And yeah, I think a lot of great discussions happened there. And I think it was at times used to coordinate activism as well.
Okay, so what kind
So
of events have it coordinated?
yeah, not many events. So I want to, yeah. So just to be upfront and transparent, this is not an activist pursuit. So those those occurrences happened organically, but it wasn't something that I was trying to direct anybody to do. So discussions would happen. People would share social media posts, right, and then people would go onto those social media posts and start commenting on them. So that's about the extent.
Okay,
Yeah.
so have you ever worked with any intactivist groups before?
Not really formally, no.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, in activist groups, no.
Oh, all right, interesting. Because I've noticed that you do have a lot of bigger people in your Discord, like Eric Klopper, for instance, is in your Discord.
Yeah, just to be clear, he's in the Discord. His involvement is next to nothing, but he is in there.
Okay. Well, I'm just confused because, like, for instance, like circumcision grief, they have a Discord, right? And they
Mhm.
do things there, but it just feels like you have a Discord that just like you just don't have a goal for this Discord. I'm just interested because a lot of people there are like intactivists, and I'm just curious what's the appeal
Yeah,
to
I mean, it
join.
certainly could evolve into something a lot more down the line. And I am trying to create an intactivist brand, if you will, or an intactivist organization to potentially steer intactivism or a portion of intactivism in the direction that I would like to see it go.
Okay, so since you want to steer intactivism, do you want to change intactivism? Like, how would you make it better? Like, what are you trying to steer it into?
Certainly. Yeah, it's not, I would say that my thoughts around this are not fully fleshed out and coherent. I don't have the strongest mental model on how I would like to see intactivism succeed or what it's going to take to get to that point. But there are things that come up within intactivism that I want to challenge at times, or I want to present a different opinion on, or a different perspective on, or strategy to accomplish a certain goal. And why I created these servers is partially so I could present my narrative to other people and be able to influence the meta of this topic.
All right, so that is a very vague description. What is the narrative that you're trying to push? What is
Well, like
your narrative?
one example that I see coming up a lot is within intactivism. With a lot of intactivists, they are, in terms of placing responsibility, where responsibility should be placed for the actual act of child circumcision itself. Something that's been bothering me recently is what I perceive as the infantilization of parents that are considering circumcision or have circumcised their child already. I'm not presenting, that there shouldn't be any forgiveness extended to parents. But what I'm seeing is this cartoonish level of infantilization of parents at times. And I don't think it's presenting the reality of the situation. So something that I feel very passionate about is taking a very principled stance on a lot of the topics that come up within intactivism, and doing the absolute best that I can to present the actual truth of the situation and the reality of the situation. And to be honest with you, I think that a lot of people, they're hungry for that. They don't want some bullshit narrative anymore presented to them. They really want to get to the heart of this issue and the truth behind the curtain. So I think being open and honest about, the depth of perversion and violence that's taking place here is a necessary component in terms of moving forward on this issue
Okay,
in a way that is advantageous for the victims.
so are you trying to change like the narrative you're trying to change is like intactivist. It's not like a pro cutter argument or a pro circumcision argument. Are you trying to change the intactivist narrative?
What I brought up there was just one example.
Okay.
So it was an example of where I wanted to inject myself into the conversation to influence people.
Okay.
So yeah. When you're involved in the discussions, you have an opportunity to change people's minds and influence the direction of other people. So
Okay.
I invite like thought leaders into the server so
All
I
right.
can present my perspective and we can have some open dialogue, which I think is sorely missing oftentimes
All right.
in this uh, in this activism.
All right. So that's great because that's what I think POTS tries to do too is have this open dialogue with everybody. So in a way, you do influence a lot of intactivist groups by having this dialogue because I feel like you're not going talking to, you know, parents that, like the quote unquote normal people,
I do.
whatever.
I mean, I do. I bring up this topic in my personal life very regularly,
Okay.
and I bring it up online very regularly. So I am having conversations with parents, with individuals that have not been exposed to this topic before at all in some instances. And I
Okay.
certainly am looking to persuade them to have a intactivist perspective on the situation.
Okay. So you're in the trenches, but you're also in the back planning things with other groups. Would that be correct?
Yeah, but it's really driven. I would say that when I'm looking to influence others, it's actually largely driven from just an emotional response within me. Like when I see people infantilizing the parents, it's not really like I'm coming up with all this robust strategy to. There's a lot of depth to the thinking there. It's more like I think this is wrong what people are doing, and I think they're presenting a perspective that's not based in reality and is ultimately going to be unappealing and unsustainable for the hearts and minds of the people that are invested in this issue.
Okay. So POTS is dumb. So what is infantilizing? What is that?
Infantilizing. So kind of removing all agency and responsibility from the parents, and maybe what could be perceived as a very and presenting them in a very childlike way in terms of their ability to have authority and perspective on this topic.
Okay. So like do you think that like parents should be like all of the blame, like partial blame for circumcision? Like what where do you stand on this?
It's a complex question, and what I believe is that it's a variable. So in some instances, more blame could be assigned than in other instances. But ultimately, what I think is that, I'll say it from my perspective, right? My parents handed me over to a man, a physician, and he amputated, a large part of my penis. And then they were intimately involved in all of the decision making and all of the care that happened afterwards. I clearly suffered and struggled, and there was no investment on their end into beforehand researching this procedure, researching, looking into the harm that was done to me afterwards. I just put myself in my parents' shoes, and I'm, even if I didn't know anything going into it and somehow got fucking bamboozled into this. Ultimately, you're seeing a child who's in severe pain, who has a clear wound on their penis. It's a very flagrant form of violence on a child, and there's a real depth to the perversion. It's on my penis. They're rubbing Vaseline on my penis, on this wounded penis. And yeah, so it's my ideology is born out of these types of thought experiments and all of these conversations that I'm having with parents. I do think that in a lot of instances, uh, you know, a sizable amount of blame and ownership can be placed on the parents. And,
Okay.
and that also they should be compelled and interested in helping in intactivism. And we don't see that at the moment from even a lot of the parents that would quote unquote call themselves regret parents. And it's possible that a portion, the rationale behind that is there's really no blame being placed on them. They just simply oftentimes walk away from the situation, going, huh, when you know better, you do better, right, mamas? Huh? Aren't I right, mamas? When you know better, you do better. And then they just walk away from the situation entirely. And I can't say that happens in every instance, right? I'm not even trying to say that. But
Yeah.
again, it's this thought experiment. I put myself in these parents' shoes, and I've just caused this egregious wound on a child's penis. And I do think in a lot of instances, it's just them burying their heads. They see something so fucked up going on here. And instead of choosing to accept and acknowledge the reality of the situation, they fall into complete degeneracy.
Okay.
And I want to say that very confidently. I say that with my chest held high, and I say that with my heart as well. It really comes from the heart. I think that this is a very perverse act, and and it's a very violent act, and they have the cognitive and ethical and moral frameworks to comprehend what went on here and what's problematic about this, and are just choosing to bury their heads into the sand. And I think that, well, I don't want to get into this too much, but I think that a portion of the inactivity from regret parents is possibly because we don't really hold them accountable to any degree. Well, I
Okay.
don't want to say we either. I mean, this is highly speculative stuff that I'm saying, so I don't see that going on.
All right. So I understand what you're saying, but devil's advocate here. So I feel like a lot of parents have to make a lot of decisions about, just not even their life, but also their kids' life too. Like, for instance,
Hmm.
a lot of things that you were describing would happen also with like getting your wisdom teeth extracted. Like, why pull the wisdom teeth out when it could grow in normal? It could, like, you have a dentist who is a professional explaining to parents, hey, these need to come out just in case they get impacted or they start pushing teeth around. And so it's like a preventative surgery. There's no problem yet, but you should just get them pulled now because it's cheaper and a lot easier. And these are a lot of the same arguments that they use for circumcision. So, and most parents are like, okay, well, you're the dentist, you're the doctor, you're the professional. So it's interesting that you want to
I don't know what
place
point
like,
you're trying to make. I have absolutely grilled my mom in particular for persuading me to, or partially being involved in persuading me to prophylactically amputate my wisdom teeth. But I wouldn't say it's certainly not to the same degree as circumcision. But yeah, my mom and my grandma did a full court press for absolutely no reason to persuade me to get my wisdom teeth amputated. And I do regret it.
Okay. So
But
the
I
thing,
don't have the same passion around as it as I do with infant circumcision. But for absolutely no reason, they pressured me into getting my wisdom teeth taken out.
but I don't think you can say for no reason because it's like for a preventative reason. Like it's the reason might be a ghost fear. It might not be like a legit thing. I mean, technically you could be correct. Like, okay, it
And
could go bad,
that's a reasonable
but
opinion to take.
yeah.
But when I walk through the sequence of logic, why I'm not sure they even fully comprehended and understood why they were trying to pressure me. It was a very ritualized type of thing. It happened to me, it's a good idea for you.
Okay. So you don't think that they were just taking the dentist's word? Like, did the dentist say, oh, they need to come out? Or was it like, oh, mom's like, you needed to get them out. I don't care what the dentist says. You need to do
I
this.
was 18 years old, so I had the autonomy and authority to really make the decision here.
Oh, so
But
you were 18 when this happened.
yeah,
Oh, okay. So that now that is a whole new can of worms because you were 18, you were getting pressured by your parents and the dentist to get it done, just like any other regret mother would have had her pressure to get her son circumcised because you have your family, your culture, and it's very interesting that you're
you know what? I walk through with the maturity that I have now,
okay.
and it's definitely a hard question to articulate just in this time that we have right here, fully get into just in this time that we have right here. But I do think it's ridiculous that I was pressured by the dentist, number one, or the dentist and the oral surgeon, and my mother and my grandmother into getting my wisdom teeth amputated for a potentially problematic reason down the line. I look at amputations of teeth, like I was 18 at the time, so I was kind of just starting my adult life. All of the wisdom that my parents achieved led them to believe that I needed to get my wisdom teeth out. I don't think they didn't go through any type of process of determining if this was wise or not. The way they looked at my body was very shallow, and the utility of these teeth and things like that. So I think about it from my perspective, and as I matured, I literally take the exact opposite approach. I think it's so clear that there are a lot of concerning things going on in the clinical side of medicine. My parents still are largely completely indoctrinated by the clinical side of medicine at the moment, and look at look at clinical figures as oftentimes like assigning inappropriate levels of authority to them. And I don't think it's born like strictly out of ignorance. I think there's a real type of cowardice taking place here, and an inability to want to dig deeper on anything. And I don't have all of the vocabulary yet and the rhetoric yet to describe what's going on and why we have such a this relationship we have with clinical medicine and this relationship that we have with our physical bodies. Right. My mother also had my sister's tonsils amputated when she was like 6 or 7 or 8. I can't remember the exact age. Maybe even possibly a little younger than that. And there was no sense to look into the anatomy of the organ. And that does bother me. You're trying to say like, or not necessarily you, but and I've heard this argument presented to me a lot, that we can't assign any blame to the parents for basically looking at clinical medicine as some type of religious doctrine of some kind. And I'm saying that we can assign blame here and say these are actually a result of a lot of negative qualities in somebody, a lot of negative behavioral patterns. I'm not saying we never extend forgiveness. I'm just saying we have to describe what's going on. The fact that my mom was just sleepwalking into a radical surgery on my own body, but also my sister's body in terms of the tonsillectomy, and never even thought to consider the utility of the organs that they're amputating and the downstream systemic impact of amputating organs from a child. the rationale she had gave me as well, and I remember this very clearly because I was also snoring. I was concerned about getting my tonsils amputated as well. I was like, shit, because the reason that my mother gave for why my sister needed to get her tonsils out, it was also some instances of tonsillitis. But when I remember asking her as a child, and it was because, she was saying like snoring is not very, I don't want to pin it all on this because it wasn't, but she said snoring was not ladylike. And I do think that played a role in her decision. I genuinely do. And she looked at snoring. I'd really want to bring my mom in to this conversation to put, because I'm putting, I'm not necessarily putting words in her mouth, but that is, she might have more to share on that to give her full comprehensive answer. But that always stuck with me. I'm like, I remember thinking like, this doesn't make sense even to me. Amputating organ, and my sister really suffered. Like getting your tonsils out is not benign, right? That's a really painful experience, and it's an amputation of organs. In my mind, there were all these alarm bells ringing. I'm like, wow, that's such an invasive thing that just happened to my sister. And it did seem like it was a different story to my parents. And so I do feel some hostility around that. But obviously, it's not like my parents were the only one with this line of thinking. But I want to get away from just saying, hey, this is just a strictly an education problem, or strictly like the reason I became more educated is because how my psychology changed to want to make me pursue a more educated approach to this.
Okay, that seems like quite a bit. Like, what percentage would you give the blame, I guess? Is this like, I know you said it varies, but what's like the, like, how far does this go, I guess? Because is it all like, I don't want to say it's all the parents' fault. And I just feel like it's also very difficult for any parent to go against what a medical authority says. And you compare it
Is it?
to,
I don't know if it, I have no idea actually.
well, wait, let me finish. And I just,
Sure.
because you compared medical to a religion, right? And I think that's not super true because religion, you have a book and it never changes. And a lot of it's by faith. And you can say, yes, science is the same way, but we have hypotheses. And then, you test it out. And if it fails, you have the scientific method. And a lot of people go off of that. And I just feel like, who do you trust? Because at the end of the day, I feel like you need to trust somebody. And I just feel like you're telling us like, oh, well, just don't trust anybody and make your own decision.
Okay, what I'm presenting is there are catastrophic flaws right now with clinical medicine in the United States, and they're flagrantly obvious to anyone who's willing to take a step back and restart from the ground up and just reevaluate medicine entirely, Western medicine entirely in the United States. And nothing is infallible and unable to be challenged. Even something like, and the way that the reason I presented clinical medicine is and affiliated that in some ways with religion is at times it seems like people are accepting of their doctrine as as gospel. Oh, the appendix is a redundant organ, right? And that's just like gets lodged into our minds that's just the way things are. Like that's what academia and medical science that's the conclusion that they came to. And once that is presented in somebody's mind, it's difficult to challenge, or it can be difficult to challenge if you're unable to, based on how you perceive the medical community and physicians and things like that. So
Okay.
I feel like they're giving a unusual level of authority and trust to these individuals, and they remove all agency from their own decision making.
With they being the parents.
Right.
Okay. Interesting. So, like, are you trying to say, I'm going to try and reiterate what you're saying. So, the medical authorities that they shouldn't persuade or have the ability, that is not an excuse for your parents to do something.
That's when like if a physician was like, "Hey, we're gonna cut off your son's head." All right, I'll do it.
Yeah, okay, true, but that would be very hard to argue. But if they said,
Well,
"Hey,
in
you're
my mind, I'm like, what the amputating my tonsils? I mean, the basic sequence of logic to follow before you amputate your tonsils is okay, what role are they playing? Why is this happening? Well, like if you're having an issue with your tonsils, why is it happening? And taking a basic scientific approach, I don't even know what I call it, a scientific approach. It's like the basic sequence of logic that you should follow. Somehow that's not happening. Like the vast majority of people, of parents that are getting their child's tonsils amputated, they don't even know what role and function the tonsils have in the human body.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so
Well, interesting. What do you mean by interesting?
oh, I mean interesting because I just feel like you expect parents to know things about medical when I could use the same argument. Like that would be the equivalent of me getting
No,
mad
no,
at,
I'm saying if they're going to move forward on an
yeah.
amputative procedure on their child, then that's when they definitely should be investigating.
Okay, interesting. Well, I would make the argument, and I've had said this too, is that parents are responsible for the child's financial education because they don't get taught. But I would never blame a parent for a kid going into debt because he went to college. I would never be like, oh, you pushed him down this path, you ruined his life. I don't know. That's just me specifically. And I just feel like, because I just feel like, okay, this is removing organs. So don't trust the medical system. But then don't trust religion, like only trust yourself. Like when you do research, you have to trust something. Like you have to read medical books and trust something. Like what doctors are you listening to? Like what books are you reading to be like, oh, I trust Dr. So and so and Dr. So and so?
Yeah, and that's a excellent question. What I'm doing is I'm gathering all of the information that I can on the subject. So, when I got older and matured, I reflected on my sister having her tonsils amputated. And I said, wow, that actually having organs amputated, that is something that's profound. And I expect that from I expect that same sequence of logic for everybody, actually. I expect you to do it. I expect other people. I'm disappointed that we aren't, that we can't even figure out these low hanging fruits like the tonsils are super important organs that shouldn't be amputated. That's very, very disappointing to me. And I will hold all of us accountable. I'm not saying we don't offer forgiveness, but I'm saying that accountability is actually extremely important in terms of being able to move forward on this issue, the appropriate amount of accountability. And you could make the argument, I don't want to take it in this direction, but you could make the argument that like slave owners, they were just kind of following the logic at the time. I guess black people, they're creating literature around black people being stupider and not being intelligent enough to have their freedom, and that it was better for them to be enslaved. They were trying to come up with all of this crazy nonsensical justification for it, and a huge portion knew it was total bullshit. And they knew, and they're following like a basic sequence of logic. Oh, well, we see black people around us that are the freed ones. There's instances where they're not seeing just solely slaves on a plantation and things like that. I think there was this very confusing time for people, maybe even like now, where some of us recognize it's mutilation, some of us don't. And I feel like the people that aren't recognizing what seems like just very elementary wisdom is not strictly an educational problem. Like they are being confronted with this reality and choosing the wrong, and it's a choice that they're making to not accept new knowledge or new understandings that are working their way in their mind because
Okay.
it's conflicting. And I'm not saying we judge people forever on this stuff and there we extend no forgiveness, but there is a more appropriate way of reflecting on knowledge and how you move forward. I don't have all the words and rhetoric to describe it yet, and I think it's going to be a long amount of time until this is more fleshed out. But we can't be sleepwalking into amputative surgeries on our children anymore, and that are causing harm that is pretty substantial. So I don't think it's even just related to the circumcision issue. I think that we have to bring a lot more agency. I don't think there's any choice at the moment. This evolution might not happen within clinical medicine. We need the evolution to happen with us and with society. And I think it really starts with the way that we approach these decisions and the background understanding that we have on something as radical as an amputative surgery on a child. The reality is we have the tools now and have for a long time to become subject matter experts on any topic. And amputating organs is something worth investing in. I don't know what arguments there could be against that. Like if you're sleepwalking into radical surgeries on your children, that is a poor reflection on you. And I think there's a lot of people that want to say, no, it's not, it's absolutely not. Parents should not be expected to really invest at all in I don't even know what type of arguments somebody's making actually. To be honest with you, I think about it from my perspective and a surgery on my child's body, I'd be 100% all in. These are the parents that are saying, I'd do anything for my child. If my child was hurt, I'd kill the person and things like that. And it's just, I don't know if it matches up to their actual actions though.
Okay, so let me ask you this. How long should somebody study something before doing it?
I think that again is a variable. So it depends on
Okay, so
what
when
it
it
is.
comes to doing surgery, like let's say you got brain cancer right now. Doctor's like, "Hey, we got to dig this out
Okay,
right now."
I'm sorry. I'm sorry to
Like,
just interrupt you. Here's what I'm saying. I think that the
okay.
vast majority of tonsillectomies, adenoidectomies,
Okay.
appendectomies, circumcisions, wisdom teeth removal or amputation, I think a huge percentage, possibly like 90% plus for everything that I listed, are completely unnecessary and are causing harm to people, and unnecessary harm, sometimes quite substantial.
All right.
What I think it's a better question for all of us. How are we collectively not recognizing this? I honestly do not think that the sole blame can be put on academia and clinical medicine, especially nowadays when we have the tools and the ability to research these topics independently. And I think a lot of it's not fair to put that expectation on other people. I say you're dead wrong. Yes, it is. And we all need to evolve in this way.
All right. Well, we're running out of time. So, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I didn't want to focus strictly on the parents side of things, but that's kind of the path we got led down,
it's
and that's
all
fine.
good. It's all good, man. Thanks for being on the show. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm
Hard.
glad to be here.
Okay, that was Carter. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Where do you place the blame? Is blame important to the movement? Also, give this a like and share it so we can continue this conversation to the broader community. Thank you for watching. Bye.